Hello everyone, my name is Caden Weist and this is my reflection of what I've learned so far in my computer literacy class. We've went over 6 modules in this class so far, and I'm just going to go over all of what we learned in the slideshow. So first module we learned the impact of digital technology. We learned about what a computer was, we learned about data, hardware, software, programs, and apps. We learned that a computer is an electronic device operating under the control of instructions stored in its own memory. We also learned the impact of Internet of Things and embedded computers. We learned that the Internet of Things is an environment where processors are embedded in every product imaginable, and these things communicate through one another via the internet or wireless networks. We also learned what an embedded computer was, and we learned about communication through these technologies like Bluetooth, RFID tags, and near field communications, NFCs. We also learned about the digital divide, and the digital divide is the gap between those who have access to technology and its resources and information, especially on the internet, between those who do not have access to those things. In Chapter 2, we learned about the web, the role of the web in daily life. We learned that the internet is a global collection of millions of computers linked together to share information worldwide. We learned about the web. We learned about what is known as the World Wide Web and its collection of web pages located on computers all around the world. We learned about web browsing terms. We learned what a web page was. We learned about the home page too. Web pages can be either static or dynamic depending on how the content is presented. A web page that is static is one where the content does not change very often, and a web page that is dynamic is one with content that changes as you interact with it. We also learned about Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP. It's the most common way to transfer information around the web to retrieve the page, often giving us a URL. We learned what a web server was, server address, internet protocol, and domain name. We learned what e-commerce and personal transactions. To make a purchase online, you visit the electronic storefront, an e-commerce website that sells products or services. We learned how search engines work. To find information quickly, you should start a general research engine like Google, Bing, Yahoo, which is designated to find general results and enter a search term or phrase into the search bar, and you'll be able to find what you're looking for. Module 3, we learned about hardware and processors. Difference between output and input devices. An input device communicates instructions and commands to a computer, which then translates the input data into a computer so the computer can interpret it. We also learned what an output data is, an output device, and that conveys information from the computer to the user based on the data and instructions that are input by the user. We learned about how to identify different types of computers and processing components. We learned about storage solutions, hard drive, and solid state drive. We learned also what a CPU is, which is a central processing unit. We also learned about a multi-core processor and also arithmetic logic unit, or ALU. We learned about RAM, which is random access memory. We learned about the motherboard, read-only memory, and BIOS, or basic input-output system. We also learned how to measure hardware performance. The following methods to evaluate the processor and the other factors impact efficiency. A professor's clock speed measures the speed at which it can execute instructions. We learned what a cycle is, the butts width, word size, a benchmark, and that is a test run by a laboratory or other organizations to determine processor speed and other information and other performance factors, like benchmarking tests, compare similar systems performing identical tasks. In Chapter 4, we learned about operating systems and file management. We learned how to examine the types of operating systems. We learned what system software is, an operating system, and an operating system that is also called a platform. Every computer or device has an operating system, even embedded computers such as those found in the AMTs or ATMs or digital cameras. We also learned how to interact with operating systems. One of the main roles of an operating system is to provide a way for you to interact with your computer. We learned about graphical user interface, or GUI. We learned what natural user interface is. We learned about the role that an operating system has. We learned about files and folders. A file is a collection of information stored onto your computer, such as text documents, spreadsheets, or photos. We learned what a data file is, and it contains words, numbers, and pictures that you can also manipulate. We also learned what an executable file is, and that contains the instructions your computer or device needs to run a program or app. Okay, getting into Module 5, we learned about app use. We learned about apps and their purposes. The terms software, program, and apps are often used interchangeably. Software is any set of instructions that tells the computer or device how to operate. We learned about different types of apps. There's native apps, mobile apps, mobile web apps, and mobile web apps are stored on the internet server and can be run entirely in a web browser using a smartphone or a tablet. We learned about additional app categories, personal interest apps, communications apps, and device management apps. We learned about presentation apps. A presentation app lets you create visual aids for your presentation to communicate ideas, messages, and other information. We learned about graphics apps. Graphics apps you can create multimedia to include in letters and reports, presentations, spreadsheets, and other documents. We also learned about graphics and media apps that allow you to interact with digital media. With photo editing apps, you can modify digital images, performing actions such as cropping, applying filters, or adding or removing backgrounds or shapes. In Module 6, we learned about cybersecurity and safety. We learned about the importance of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is one of the most important. Cybersecurity is important because the primary goal of a cyber attack is to take money from their attackers, often leaving us responsible to rely on the stolen funds and spend hundreds of hours trying to solve the situation. We learned about the type of attackers, cyber criminals, script kiddies, brokers, cyber terrorists, hacktivists, and state actors. We learned about the risks of data collection. You and everyone else has large amounts of personal data, your name, where you live, your social security number, your school records, and your health information, and on. And sometimes you are asked to give someone that personal data, and they will then have access to all of that information. We learned about technology hazards such as environmental hazards such as e-waste or electronic waste, which is electrical or electronic equipment that no longer works or is no longer being used. We learned about the use of anti-malware software. Anti-malware software is a software that you can combat viruses, malware attacks to protect files. We learned about antiviruses, intrusion prevention, reputation protection and behavioral